Hello and welcome to... Well, this is awkward. I have to be honest with you. This is not my usual Thursday night gig. Usually, I'm knee-deep in some corporate malfeasance or trying to explain the intricacies of pigeon birth control to a nation that, frankly, stopped listening about 3 minutes ago. But no, tonight, we're talking superpowers. Yes, those superpowers. The ones with more military hardware than sense, and believe me, that's a lot of hardware. We're diving headfirst into their military might, from sheer manpower to shiny, expensive toys. And because no geopolitical analysis is complete without a healthy dose of what if, we'll be indulging in some good old-fashioned hypothetical conflict scenarios. Don't worry, no actual countries will be harmed in the making of this video. Probably. First up, the reigning heavyweight champion of military spending, the United States of America. Now, I know what you're thinking, John. Isn't it a bit on the nose to start with the biggest kid on the block? And to that, I say, yes, yes it is. But much like a toddler hopped up on sugar and a misguided sense of self-importance, you just can't ignore the U.S. military. They've got more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined. That's like owning every single Uber in a city and then some. They've also got enough nuclear firepower to turn the planet into a radioactive wasteland several times over, which is comforting. Look, the point is, when it comes to raw military might, the U.S. is still the big dog. And by a lot, I mean the U.S. military budget is larger than the next 10 countries combined. And while some of that goes towards, actually defending the country, a lot of it also goes towards, well, let's just call it keeping defense contractors in solid gold swimming pools. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot to admire about the American military. It's like they're constantly looking for the next big fight, the next opportunity to flex their considerable muscles. Let's talk manpower for a second. The U.S. military is massive, with over 1.3 million active personnel, or at least that's what they tell them. But let's be honest, in this day and age, it's not just about boots on the ground. Next up, we've got the People's Republic of China, a country that's been playing the long game for, well, a very long time. And let me tell you, their game is strong. While the U.S. has been busy fighting wars in the Middle East, China's been quietly building up its military into a force to be reckoned with. They've been investing heavily in new technologies, modernizing their equipment, and expanding their military presence around the world. Now, China might not be able to match the U.S. in terms of raw military spending, yet. But what they lack in quantity, they more than make up for in, well, quantity. They've got the largest standing army in the world, with over 2 million active personnel. That's enough people to form a human chain around the equator twice. Not that I'm recommending they try that, mind you, logistics would be a nightmare. But it's not just about the sheer number of boots on the ground. China's been making some serious strides in its naval capabilities as well. They've been churning out warships like they're going out of style, including aircraft carriers that, while not quite on par with the U.S. behemoths, are still nothing to sneeze at. And let's not forget about their hypersonic missiles. Those things are terrifying. They can fly at speeds that make a fighter jet look like a horse-drawn carriage, and they're designed to be almost impossible to intercept. It's like trying to swat a fly with a brick, while blindfolded, and the fly is also on fire. It's just not going to end well. But here's the thing about China. They're not just interested in playing catch-up. They want to surpass the U.S. as the world's dominant military power, and they're not being particularly subtle about it. They've been building artificial islands in the South China Sea, militarizing them, and generally throwing their weight around in a way that's making their neighbors more than a little nervous. Chapter 3. Russia. The bear is back and grumpy as ever. Ah, Russia, the land of borscht, ballet, and, well, let's just say their approach to international diplomacy is a bit more hammer than ballet shoe these days. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia went through a bit of a rough patch economically and militarily. But under the watchful eye of Vladimir Putin, And by watchful eye, I mean shirtless horseback riding, bear wrestling autocrat. They've been staging a comeback. Now, Russia might not have the same kind of global reach as the US or China, but they're still a force to be reckoned with. They've got the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, which is, well, it's certainly something. It's like that friend who brings a bazooka to a water gun fight. Sure, it's impressive, but also maybe a tad overkill. But it's not just about nukes with Russia. They've also been investing heavily in modernizing their conventional forces, particularly their Army and Air Force. They've got some seriously impressive tanks, fighter jets, and missiles, and they're not afraid to use them. Just ask anyone who lives in Ukraine. Russia's military doctrine is all about speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. They're not interested in long, drawn-out conflicts. They want to get in, achieve their objectives, and get out before anyone knows what hit them. It's like a surgical strike, except the surgeon is a bear wearing a Ushanka hat and wielding a Kalashnikov. One of their key strengths is their mastery of information warfare. India, the sleeping giant, awakens, and it's got 1 billion potential recruits. Now we come to India, a country that's often overlooked in discussions of global superpowers. But with a population of over 1.3 billion people and a rapidly growing economy, India is a sleeping giant that's starting to stir. And when this giant fully awakens, let me tell you, the world is going to feel the rumble. India has the second largest standing army in the world, right behind China. That's a lot of potential soldiers. They've also been investing heavily in modernizing their military, buying up new weapons systems from countries like Russia, France, and the United States. It's like they're playing geopolitical shopping spree, adding the latest and greatest military hardware to their cart with reckless abandon. But India's military ambitions go beyond just catching up with the big boys. They've got some pressing security concerns in their own backyard, namely their rivals, Pakistan and China. They fought multiple wars with Pakistan, and their border with China is a constant source of tension. Chapter 5. The United Kingdom, punching above their weight, but maybe missing a few teeth. And finally, we come to the United Kingdom, a country that's always had a bit of a chip on its shoulder when it comes to its place in the world. Once upon a time, the sun never set on the British Empire. Now, well, the sun sets at a very reasonable hour, thank you very much. But don't let that fool you. The UK still likes to think of itself as a major player on the world stage, even if it sometimes feels like they're trying to fit into their old school uniform and hoping no one notices it's a bit snug. They've still got a formidable military with a respectable navy, a well-trained army, and a surprisingly capable air force. They're also one of the few countries in the world with nuclear weapons, which is, well, it's certainly a conversation starter. It's like that friend who shows up to a dinner party with a monocle and a top hat. Sure, it's a bit much, but you have to admire their commitment to the bit. But let's be honest, the UK is playing in a different league than the other superpowers on this list. Their military is a fraction of the size of the US or China, and their economy, while still significant, isn't quite in the same ballpark. It's like trying to compete in a Formula One race with a really nice Mini Cooper. You might be able to hold your own for a while, but you're not going to win any championships. So what's the U.K. quote S strategy in a world dominated by giants? Well, they're trying to be the best friend they can be. To the United States, that is. They're America's biggest cheerleader, their most loyal ally, their partner in crime, literally in some cases. They're like the Robin to America's Batman, except Robin's wearing a bowler hat and carrying an umbrella. And in this corner, it's the future of warfare. So there you have it, folks, a whirlwind tour of the world's top 5 superpowers and their military might. We've seen the muscle flexing, the technological one-upmanship, and the frankly terrifying amount of firepower at their disposal. It's enough to make you want to crawl under a table and wait for the apocalypse to blow over. Or, you could just grab some popcorn and settle in for what's shaping up to be a very interesting century, because here's the thing, the nature of warfare is changing. It's no longer just about tanks and planes and boots on the ground. It's about cyber warfare, space weapons, artificial intelligence, and all sorts of other things that sound like they were ripped straight out of a science fiction novel. And in this new era of warfare, the old rules don't necessarily apply. So who will come out on top in this brave new world? Who will be the master of the digital battlefield? Who will control the high ground of space? And perhaps most importantly, who will be the first to accidentally launch a nuclear weapon because they mistook a flock of geese for an incoming missile attack? These are the questions that keep me up at night, well, that and the crippling fear that I left the oven on.